Welcome to the Maximum Mom podcast. I am so excited today, right after Thanksgiving, to have Bridgette Bennett join me. Bridgette is the founder of the Bennett Law Center in Groveland, Florida, and she focuses exclusively on immigration and business law with an emphasis on removal defense, waivers, and family and humanitarian cases. Welcome, Bridgette. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us, well, first, I always just like, tell us a little bit about your family. Who makes you a mom? Tell us who's in your home so we can get to know you a little bit.
Okay, so I'm married. We've been married for about 22 years. We have a total of 3 children, my stepdaughter, but she's 30, so she's a grown adult. And I have Brianna, who is almost 20. Oh my God. In 3 weeks, she'll be 20.
Wow.
And I have Steven, who is a senior in high school, and he will be 18 in January. And I have 1 fur baby, Ginger.
That is awesome. Well, you are getting close to empty nest life, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty excited. Are you and your husband like getting all ready? Are you like coming up with all the things you think you're going to do as an empty nester?
No, it's a little scary, actually, thinking about it. We've always traveled with the kids, so it's never stopped us from traveling and exploring and things of that nature. So it'll be kind of weird. So I don't know what to expect. I don't know if I'll be uber happy or uber sad. Probably a little bit of both, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's very typical. I mean, I am kind of a new empty nester, within the last year or so. And it definitely was a mix of super happy and super sad. But also, I think the thing that was so striking to me is I kind of had this thought, and God knows where I got this thought, but I had this thought that somehow when my kids went off to school or they were out of my house, that I would kind of like have more freedom in the sense of not going and doing things, but not being so responsible all the time, like not having people like watching me, like looking at how am I maintaining the house? Am I putting my dishes in the dishwasher? Do you know what I mean? Kind of modeling all that behavior that I feel like we parents spend a lot of time. I mean, some of us, 20, 30 years of parenting, modeling this behavior. Well, I don't know what I thought. I just thought somehow I was going to get to be my wild, crazy old self and leave dishes on the counter and, do whatever. It doesn't work like that. These kids are around, like they show up, they pop in, they call, they're FaceTiming, they're needing this and that and the other. And, I'll be on FaceTime and somebody will be like, where are you? Well, that's a mess. And I'm thinking, who are you judging my space?
That's so funny.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, that has been a whole different thing, trying to deal with. And, the stuff they need, and this from your daughter, I'm sure it's all of a sudden way bigger. The idea that it's like, Mom, I need you to help pick me up at lacrosse practice or whatever. Now it's like, I'm, withdrawing from this class and I don't know what my major is going to be. And oh my gosh, I went to the wrong school. You know what I mean? It's these big life things.
Yeah, now my daughter is her next thing is studying abroad. And I'm like, Brianna, you are abroad.
Yeah,
but she's gonna go to South Korea.
Oh, good
for
for
a semester.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome. And now when is she doing that? Is she doing that her sophomore year or junior?
Well, she's a sophomore now.
Okay.
But she actually has enough credits to graduate at the end of next year. So it would be her fall semester next year.
That is going to be an awesome opportunity. I love that. Yeah. All of our kids have been abroad. They loved it, all different places. And I think that it was a really good opportunity for them. The schools make it so easy now for them to go abroad.
They do.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, they definitely have kind of mastered that science of like getting these kids to go abroad. It's actually pretty impressive. I felt like I
Mhm.
knew nothing. My kids were just like, okay, mom, I'm leaving in 3 days. I'm going to this country. And I was like, great, bye, see ya.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I had nothing to do with any of it. And so they just somehow managed the whole process. And yeah, so that was all good.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, that I think is one of the biggest joys, though, of that empty nesting is really watching your kids just be able to do all the things completely on their own, and that's, I think it's both a mix, though, of getting used to not being needed. I mean, genuinely, just like, as kind of an advisor, sometimes they need you, but the actual logistical things, they just go along about their business.
Yeah, that's actually one of my biggest fears. I'm like, did I coddle my kids too much? You want to protect them. Did I protect them too much? So I kind of like the fact that Brianna is far away. She's had to learn to figure things out, learn how to take the bus, get lost, all the things,
Yeah.
moving on her own. So it's good because I know she's learning life skills. So that was good because that, as a parent, that was always one of my things. Did I protect them too much so that now they don't know anything about living outside of our home?
Right. Yeah, that I probably was not as nice a mom as you. I was the opposite. I was like, okay, y'all go do your thing. Like, you need to learn all this. And if anything, I think I pushed mine too early to do a lot of things and to kind of make them be independent early. Cause I was just like, I sometimes, I blame the numbers, like there was a lot. And I was just like, okay, I don't have time to, figure out how to get you to a doctor appointment. Like, you need to figure out how to make your doctor appointments, your dentist appointments, get places, do things. And so by the time they went to college, I mean, they all were so ready, yeah, to be gone and do their thing. Um, yeah, it's interesting, though, how different parenting styles, I think, really comes into play, and you see it as kids go off to college, and I think we see it even in gender kids sometimes, like, I think as a mom of 3 boys, I've watched many of their friends stand in my laundry room not knowing how to wash clothes. And my sons are like, come on, guys, you got to know how to wash your clothes. Like, how are you
Well, for
gonna?
that, yeah, I'm not that mom. Like, I don't cook a whole lot. So my kids had to learn how. Brianna doesn't cook, but she knows how to make a good sandwich.
Right.
Steven, now he likes to eat, so he needed to learn how to cook. So he makes a lot of steaks. He's really
Yum.
good at that. They both know how to do laundry. They are spoiled. We do have a cleaning lady that comes once a week, so I don't kill them about keeping their rooms clean, but they know how
Right.
and they know what a clean house looks like. So things like that. But I think more on life stuff. I'm like, they didn't really have an exposure to a whole lot of the hardship that I went through,
Right.
um, being, an immigrant coming. I was the one to learn a lot about how the system works and
Yeah.
helping my parents and things of that nature. I went away to school when I was 14, um, for
Wow.
high school. So I've always been, you know, out
Right.
there doing my thing. So I'm like, man, would they be able to survive? And I guess so.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about, how did your immigrant story turn into you practicing immigration law?
Well, um, coming to America has always been a dream of mine. I bought all the Kool-Aid when I was a kid, and people don't realize when you're outside of America, you hear all of these things, you see these images, and you want to be a part of that. So I've always had this desire to be here. And my dad immigrated first, and then after a couple of years, he was able to bring me and my mom. So I came when I was 9, and just had the immigrant experience. Most immigrants land in New York, right? So that's where we were. And growing up on an island and landing on February 28th, 1988 in a snowstorm
Yeah.
was pretty new for me. So it was like, oh my God, I remember coming and seeing the wonder. It was like, oh my God. It was just this wonder of wow, and playing in the snow and all that. So I enjoyed my time. But always stayed in touch with the immigrant community. So when I went off to Georgetown, which is diverse, but it's not an HBCU. So the opportunities for my kind of parties listening to reggae music were few and far between.
Right.
So I actually used to go to parties at Howard University, which wasn't that far away in
Right.
DC. So I went to one of their homecomings, and that's when I met my husband. He was on an immigration visa, like an entertainer visa, and he was the guest DJ at that particular event. And funny, my roommate at the time was friends with his manager. So that's how we got to know each other. And he overstayed that visa, meaning that, he was granted a certain amount of time to stay and he didn't chose not to go back. So with that in mind, that ensued a 10-year period of immigration trauma. That's what I'll call it.
Yeah.
We spent over $30,000, 3 different attorneys. Eventually, he was placed in removal or deportation proceedings with
Oh
2
my,
young kids, and it was just a horrible period of time. And with the experience that we had, I just thought, there is a purpose for my pain.
right.
And I always knew I was going to be an attorney or wanted to be an attorney. When I was a kid in Jamaica, my nickname was Parrot because I talk so much. And I was always asking questions, and I was a little nerd. But after I graduated from Georgetown, I've been in school since I was 2.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm tired of school. I just want to work. I want to live. So right after school, we got married. 2 years later, started a family, and I just wanted to work.
Right.
And so I went into corporate America. I was very happy. We were able to buy our first home despite all of his immigration issues. Um, and we had a nice life. So for 6 years, I was in corporate America. But then life happened, and my mom moved to Florida and got very, very sick. We didn't know if she was going to make it. And so I wanted to be close by. I'm the eldest child for her. So we sold our house, moved down, and that's when he was actually placed in removal proceedings.
Mm.
And with all of that, I decided I didn't want to be in corporate America anymore. And I decided to quit my job and go to law school. So from 2008, I was out of school for 8 years. 2008 to 2011, I went to school full time. He took care of the kids, did most of that stuff, along with help from my mom and sisters and extended family and church. Um, to kind of, that was a big sacrifice. So
Oh, yeah.
that's how I ended up in immigration. And when I finished law school in 2011, sat for the bar and passed, I just wanted a job. I'm like, okay, I've tried broke. I don't like it. So let's find a real job. And it was kind of the tail end of the recession, and people still weren't really hiring.
Right.
So I opened up my own immigration firm, and 11 years later, here we are.
That is amazing. What a story. I mean, the trauma though, I mean, I love that you actually call it out for what it is. I mean, that was serious trauma that your family went through.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it also makes me very relatable. I don't share the story with all of potential clients, but sometimes there are a few people that just need some hope because our situation was pretty hopeless.
Wow.
And we got through it. It was hard. It was very difficult. not knowing, is he going to get deported? What's going to happen to our family? So sometimes I share that as a way of encouraging someone else or inspiring them. So it's nice when you've sat in the other side of the seat. So that actually worked in our favor because I could actually really relate to people.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just amazing. Now, your immigration practice, I mean, immigration is a federal practice, but you're in Florida, correct? I mean, your office
Correct.
is in Florida, but you represent people all around the country? Or-
Yes, all over the world. Yeah.
Okay. Fascinating. And do you focus at all on a particular, like, do you focus on Jamaica or any particular area, or is it just all people, all immigration? I've never done immigration, so I'm always fascinated by the practice.
Well, I think a combination of blessings and luck. And so where my mom lives, it turns out that there is a very heavy Mexican population here. And I just happen to be like my daughter, loving languages. So I studied Spanish for 12 years, didn't speak it after I graduated college. But with that said, I had some Spanish there. It was a little rusty because, it was 11 years later, but I picked it up. So the majority of my clientele, I would say probably 80%, are from Spanish speaking countries, heavy Mexican population, and they've kind of adopted me. They're like la morena que habla español, the brown girl who speaks Spanish or the black lady who speaks Spanish. So in fact, some of my clients, they call me Jamexican American. So I'm Jamaican, Mexican, and American.
I love that. That is awesome.
Yeah. And I do have a good amount of Caribbean clients as well. Because I know, lots of people. I've done a little bit of a rebrand as the reggae visa lawyer.
Yeah.
My husband has a lot of connections in the industry, so I'm able to work with artists and entertainers who want to get that kind of visa that he had,
Right.
to come here and tour and perform. So I do that branding to bring that population in. 2 years ago, I purchased a business immigration law practice. And so from that practice, I have a lot of Chinese clients that do the investment visas. So I kind of have a pretty big mix.
Yeah, you sure do. I love that. Now, are you personally still practicing law, or do you have a team? I mean, what does your firm look like?
Well, it's 14 of us as of today because I got me an executive assistant.
Hey!
Woo, woo, woo. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's game changing.
Oh my gosh. I've been waiting for the right person, trying to find the right person, and I think I found her. So
Oh,
I'm
so
very
excited.
happy with that. But we kind of grew up. We kind of grew up. So with 14 people, I am the CEO, or I aspire to be the
Right.
CEO. I'm still also director of legal services, and I still practice a little bit. My goal is to fill that director of legal services so that I don't have to practice. I'll just take on a couple of cases
Sure.
here or there because running a firm, with one or two staff members and practicing, that was doable. But with 14 people, I cannot practice. It's just, I cannot.
Right.
So I really spend or try to spend a lot of my time on business development systems. I've grown a lot with Law Firm Mentor with Allison Williams, who you probably had on your podcast at some point.
Yeah.
So I'm in that journey. So we have our finance and administration department that deals, Marina takes care of everything finance and bills and admin. And, eventually we'll have an HR person because we're big enough for that.
Oh,
The
yeah.
legal, it's myself and one other attorney, but I'm very close to getting that big position filled with another senior attorney, which will be game changing. And then we have our sales and marketing team, which is 2 people. I think I probably still need one more person there to kind of round things out. So that's where we are. So we're kind of a medium-sized firm.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a lot of growth though that you've been dealing with. I mean, that's a lot of busyness that you've had.
Yes.
Has immigration, how does the business of immigration work like during COVID and then now as we're kind of going into a recession? Does immigration kind of not ebb and flow with that, or what does that look like for immigration?
Immigration is just awful. The pandemic made it worse in the sense of
Yeah.
backlogs.
Mhm.
So the other day we had a legal team meeting and we were talking about our bread and butter cases, which are immigration waivers, extreme hardship waivers.
Mhm.
And when I was practicing years ago, a full case of that would be like a year and a half and you'd be done. Right now, these cases are about 5 years, 5 to 6 years. So financially, I'm looking at, okay, I'm still charging as if this case is going to take a year and a half, 2 years, and now we're double or triple that amount. So besides the laws, the immigration laws needing reform and just being dumb, we're dealing with government stuff. We're dealing with backlogs. During COVID, the USCIS, who adjudicates the green cards and citizenship and work permits and things of that nature, they lost 25% of their workforce. So that's 4,000 employees.
Oh my, wow.
So things that would take a very short time are now just so behind, and that leads to a lot of client frustrations. Why is it taking so long? And we have the same answers. They're short staffed. It's immigration. We've done our part of the work, but now we've had to really try to service these clients and get them to understand that it is now out of our hands. But I mean, clients are not really understanding of that. They think it's the lawyer's fault. Why isn't it?
Right.
But
I
I
mean,
try to,
yeah,
yeah,
managing those client expectations has to be really tricky.
it is. And that can impact morale because, we're getting irate people when you haven't done anything wrong. And it's just the holdup. So the immigration process, the laws are just terrible. And it's not just for one group of people, it's for everyone. So we have clients on the business side who want to invest in the United States and create businesses. We have people investing $1 million into a project that want to get their residence and green cards. And those processes take 10 to 11 years and they're creating 10 American jobs. So it's like, why are we shutting these people out? It doesn't make sense.
Wow.
So I'm a big proponent of immigration reform because
Oh,
things just don't make sense right now.
right.
Sometimes I have hearings set out in 2025 for a first hearing. I mean, it's crazy.
Wow. 2025.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
amazing. Oh my
It's
God.
crazy. It's
It really is.
insane.
I can't even imagine what managing those client expectations would look. I mean, it's almost, I would think, I mean, as an attorney, it feels hard to understand, and only imagine what a client would feel being told, yeah, well, here's your hearing date, in April 2025.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That is fascinating. I would love to switch and pivot a little bit and talk to you about, I mean, I know that you have kind of a big emphasis on education and you really believe in, education as being an important part of, people, not only in the immigration world, but, otherwise. I mean, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on education and how can education really help what we're facing today.
Yeah. So I'm a big proponent of education because I do believe that knowledge is power. I believe that immigrants are a very vulnerable population, and there are a lot of unscrupulous people out there. They're called notarios, meaning notary. And so in other countries, a notary is actually a licensed attorney. So a lot of times, immigrants, when they get here and they see a notary, they think it's an attorney. And these notaries, they will represent themselves like, oh, I can do your immigration paperwork. And then they screw things up. People get removed. People get in a lot of problems. So we do a lot of seminars in the communities. Haven't done much, since COVID, but we go out to churches, schools, daycare centers, wherever, and we really and truly sit down, and just an hour I talk. I'm like, okay, these are certain options. If you're a victim of a crime, if you're a victim of domestic violence, here's what you need to know. Not everyone can be helped. I think just being a truth speaker.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we turn away a lot of people. If there's nothing, I'm not going to invent something because I feel sorry for you, which is hard because I want to help everyone. But just getting out there and sharing information, people are like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, did you know that if you may be the victim of human trafficking? No one goes around and says, I'm the victim of human trafficking. But we can have conversations to find out, how are you being treated at work? How did you come to the United States? Like all of those things. So we plant seeds into people's minds so they understand what options are out there and what not to believe. How do you know this person's a licensed attorney? Are they an attorney? So just kind of building some trust within the community. I think that's very important. I also try to do the same with law enforcement. A lot of times, the immigrant community is fearful, particularly those that are undocumented, that if I'm undocumented woman or mom and I'm a victim of domestic violence, a lot of times they are afraid to call because I don't want to lose my children. I don't want them to pick me up. So a lot of crime goes unreported. So I actually just had a conversation with the chief of police in my town. I'm like, yeah, I would like to be able to work with you because and do a training for you guys. How are you treating immigrants when you respond to a call? Are your people re-traumatizing? Are they building an understanding of the fear some of these people have? What can we do to work together? So not just education on the client side, but on the community side as well.
Gosh, I love that. That is such an important thing. I would think there's a lot of room for education amongst just your average, patrol guy who's off like answering a call, who might not have any insight into the trauma that this person has gone through, even to make the call at all.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. That is really wonderful. I love that you're doing that. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, my one foray into immigration was I worked and did a U visa for a lady, and when I lived in Minnesota, just it was like a pro bono kind of project thing that we did.
Nice.
And yeah, and it was awesome. And when she got approved and I had to go to her house to give her the notice and give her everything, like she didn't come to my office or whatever. And I actually had one of my children with me at the time. He was pretty young. And so when I was there and he was sitting in the car and I was like explaining this to her, and I mean, she just kind of lost it. She was so excited, just like thrilled and just so grateful. And my son was just like, at first he was like, what happened? Like, why is she crying? And then he's like, but she's like happy crying. And I was like, she's definitely happy crying. But it made me just realize how truly impactful immigration law is. Like, I mean, really impactful.
And so you're familiar with the U visa cases. There is such a backlog on those. They're taking 7 years right now just to get a response.
What?
Because there are only 10,000 U visas available per year. And once those are used up, then you have to wait till the next year, and just it piles up and piles up.
7 years.
6 to 7 years. I think
That
we just got one from 2016. Our 2016 cases are just coming approved.
amazing. Wow. They need to do some serious hiring there, don't they?
They are, and that's creating other problems. So,
I
for
bet.
example, now these untrained people, they're sending silly requests for evidence. They don't know the legal standards. So
Right.
that is coming with other things.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I would imagine that. Yeah. Okay, well, lastly, we're going to pivot to something nice. We're going to talk about self-care and how kind of, you can reboot using vacations. I know you are a major travel person. Tell us a little bit about your travel, what you're doing with travel now. I mean, and just tell us about your travel.
So for me, travel is life. I am a natural explorer. I love history. I love learning about different cultures. I just love it. I love being out in nature. I love mountains. I know I'm an island girl, but I love my mountains. I love hiking. We just did Machu Picchu with 6 other amazing attorneys. Um, but for me, that's my gift to myself. And I actually struggle with it because people are like, oh, you're always traveling, you're always gone. I'm like, yeah, but you don't see me always working, right?
Yeah.
This is what I do for myself. And so instead of shrinking back from the few who will say, oh, she's always traveling, to saying, no, this is important to me. I'm not a fancy dresser. I have a nice home, but I would rather rack up frequent flyer miles than stuff in my house. That's
Yeah.
just who I am. And I'm just being okay with that. So,
Right.
what I do is, whether it's a speaking engagement or attending a conference, I will choose based on destination. So, I want to go to different places. And then I'll tack on a day or two. So even though I'm working, maybe, I've been going to San Diego a lot because I have a client out there. So I go to work, but I enjoy San Diego, and I might take a trip down to to Tijuana. So I actually combine a lot of work and pleasure at the same time. So on the cruise, Monday through Wednesday, the office was open. And so I took, 3 hours a day, and I got some work done. And the rest of the time, I felt good to enjoy. So a lot of times I just kind of combine. Very rarely do I really have full time off. Um, so travel for me is my self-care.
I love that. I do love how you balance it though. I mean, I always call it life work integration. And I feel like
Mm.
by doing that, by having those 3 hours, a day on your cruise, you're able to integrate what you like. I mean, what you need to do, maybe a client needs you or your office needs you, and that's great. But then be able to enjoy your time as well. I think it is, I sometimes feel like people want such a demarcation between, what their life is and what their work is. And I find as a business owner, it's not always possible to draw that hard line. And a lot of times being more flexible about integrating the two, and like you're doing, where you're traveling and then you're adding on days to do things, with a work trip. But I mean, accepting that you can do both, I think is really opens the possibilities up so much more.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways to achieve work-life balance, because I think that's such a fallacy, especially for women business owners. Um, I don't think there is such a thing as work-life balance.
Yeah.
Um, and being the podcast you have, the truth of the matter is I have sacrificed time with my children, with my husband. I do get the mom guilt. So when we do, that's why I take my kids on trips.
Yeah.
I think they've been to over 20 countries already, you know. But that's our time together. and
Mhm.
they know mommy works to travel. So
Yeah.
we all can travel. But I just don't like this work-life balance. I think it's very hard to be very successful at all of it. So I do hope that my children feel that they've gotten enough of me. And then when we have our time together, we have our time. It might not be, we definitely don't sit down and have dinner together. We're not that kind of family.
Mhm.
Never have been. We're on the go,
Right.
between work, sports, band, all the stuff. There's just so much going on. So we've never had that kind of life. I know I've sacrificed time with my husband. I just hope it's worth it for everyone. But there are sacrifices that have to be made, and that's just one of the cold hard facts about being an attorney, about owning your firm.
Yep.
Um, it's not a job that we can just go home and let it go.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Well, I find sometimes, I mean, I find myself chuckling, I'll read something online and somebody will be like, well, I'm going to go start my own firm so that I work less and I have more freedom. And I'm like, oh gosh, I was like, this person needs to talk to somebody and get some real insight before they think they're about to enter this panacea of less work and more freedom. Because I'm like, I mean, the reality is, and I know you have dealt with it as well. I mean, it's an 80-hour-a-week job, many weeks of, when you're starting your firm and you're doing all the things, there is a lot of work that goes into owning a law firm.
It's so true. It's so true. And I agree with you. I think that people think it's all that and a bag of chips.
Yeah,
The grass looks greener, but the water bill is higher.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There is such a great book. I mean, I would love for you and our listeners it's called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. And I just read it recently. And it is about the finitude of our lives and the reality that most people have 4,000 weeks to live. Like, that's kind of the premise of the book. But it is all about accepting that you cannot do it all. Like, get over that thought. Like, just let it the F go. I mean, let it go completely. And once you can come to terms with the fact that you cannot do it all, then really prioritizing, what do you not want to do? Like, prioritize all the stuff that does not matter to you. Like in your world, maybe sitting down, having these elaborate dinners every night with kids. Maybe that wasn't something that mattered. You know what I mean? Like you're better off working, planning, so you can take some amazing trip that you all are going to remember. I mean, everybody has different priorities, but it was such a powerful read. I cannot tell you. I mean, and
I
I
just
feel
wrote it
like I
down.
read hundreds of books, and this one literally stopped me in my tracks. I was like, this is a really good thing to get our heads around, because like you said, I think all of us are built in this idea that we're trying to get to some work-life balance, and we're trying to get to some place in life when everything is going to be calm and right. It's just not going to happen. Like, it's just everybody has things that are going on, problems, cycles of problem. You know what I mean? Just all the things.
It's so interesting. This morning, as I was speaking doing a little orientation with my new executive assistant. I'm so excited to keep saying that. Um, I wrote down joy in the journey. And that's something that I'm going to take with me into 2023. I think that's going to be my mantra, because we do always, at least for me, I'm always, getting to the next place, getting to this, getting to that. And this, right now my building is under construction, and I'm like, when it's done, I'll be happy. When it's done, I can do this. When I get my assistant, my life is going to be great. And it's always, I'm trying to get to the next thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, I need to find joy in the journey.
Yep.
So even though I'm a very driven person, I'm ambitious, I can still find joy and contentment and in happiness as I make progress towards those things. And that's
Absolutely.
been a huge challenge for me. So I'm definitely going to add this book to my list because I
Yeah,
think it goes along with
it
what you
does.
just talked about.
Well, and I don't know if you have read that book called The Gap and the Gain. Have you read that book? Oh,
Mm-mm.
you would find, based on what you just said, you would find that book. I was going to see if I have it really handy. I forget who wrote it. It might have been, um, I'm not a huge fan of his, but, Dan Stevens, it might have been him. But, it is so powerful because I, like you, am exceedingly ambitious, constantly looking ahead. And I was never satisfied, ever, ever, ever. Like, and it's all about, so when you're like that, when you're looking ahead, there's always gaps. So there's always problems, and the minute you get close to one of your goals to hitting it, you move the goalpost. You're like, oh, okay, well, I'm building my building now. Now I'm going to open an office in another state, or I'm going to whatever, you know what I mean? Where you're just constantly moving the goalpost. So you're always in a gap. Well, and it talks about how you must intentionally take time to look at where you've come from and look at the
Mhm.
gains you've made, because you can spend all your time just chasing the next thing and you never stop and say, oh my gosh, like, I graduated from law school with little kids. I started a law firm. I, grew a law firm. I hit whatever revenue goal you might have had. Do you know what I mean? Like all the things you have accomplished. And I bet, like you and me, we probably both, if we look at our list, it's a bunch of what we haven't done rather
Correct.
than what we have done.
Celebrating, yeah,
Yeah.
the success, yeah.
And I mean, it is literally for the last 2 years, that has been something that I've been really trying to change and really focusing on, because I mean, I can just plain drive myself crazy with all the problems and the things I need to fix and this and that. And I rarely just look backwards and say, oh, you did that pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
and so I really would encourage that book. It's a super easy read, but wow, and it gives you that vocabulary, when you're finding yourself constantly in the gap. And I don't know about you, but it's something I do to others too. Like my team, I'll be looking at their gap rather than their gain. And that's not fair.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. I wrote down those two books.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting. I wish I had read them as a younger mom, but because I'm like, I probably did the same thing to my children, where I was like, oh, well, why haven't you done this, this, and this? And I mean, instead of looking at what they had done, and even more importantly, asking them, like, do you even want to do this, this, and this? Whatever I'm thinking matters. Like, really stepping back and trying to let your kids have agency. Yeah, there's a lot to be had in this conversation. You and I could have a whole nother conversation.
On that, yeah.
Absolutely. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time today and sharing with us. I really am grateful to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for thinking of me. This was fun. I wasn't quite sure, what to expect, but this was great. It's just a conversation between moms and business owners and attorneys. And I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you for having me.